Hello, Algebra 2 students. Today we are going to go through your Pearson assignment and let you practice what you learned about inverses. So, I don't know if we can move this. Yeah, we can move that. Look at there. Learn something new every day. All right. I'm going to go back to question 1 of 9. This is Pearson 1-4. And there are 9 questions, and it deals with inverses, what you learned in the previous video about switching the x and y. Okay, so number 1 says find the inverse of the relation shown below. Piece of cake, guys. What do we do with these x's and y's? We switch them. So the x's should be -2, -2, 1, 2, and 6. So it's either this one or that one, right? And the y should be -3, -1, 1, and 5. Okay. Remember that your numbers will be different. Your question is exactly the same. You have a table. You're going to switch the x's and y's. The difference is your numbers will be different, but the concept is the same. You're going to take your table, switch the x's and the y's, and that's the inverse. Now, part of knowing what's right in multiple choice is by knowing what's wrong. What's wrong with B? It looked like, what did they do? They flipped this upside down or something. 5, -1. I don't know what they did. But they did not. If you switch the x and y, the first point should be -2, -3, right? So look, it has to be this one. It can't be that one. It can't be that one. What's wrong with this one? If you look at the first point, should be -2, -3. This point, switch it, should be 1, -1. Nope, wrong. Has to be A. Final check. Fantastic. Okay, next question. Remember to read the blue letters if you have any little blue letters. This is for each function f of x, write the equation of the inverse, then graph the inverse on a coordinate plane. Okay, this is why I wanted to video this, because you haven't used the graphing tool on here before. But let's look at this equation. Okay, you have f of x equals 4x minus 20. And the first part, notice down here it says 1 part remaining, right? That means we have this part and one more. Okay, so f of x equals 4x minus 20. That's the same thing as the y, right? You won't all need to write that step down, but just in case you didn't know. Now, first step in finding the equation inverse. Remember, we have 2 steps. Switch, solve. So what are we switching? We're switching the x and the y. We did the switch. Now we're going to do the solve. What do we solve? We solve for the y. How do I get rid of minus 20? And then how do I get rid of times 4? Divide by 4, divide by 4, which leaves me 1/4 x plus 20 divided by 4 is 5. Okay. Test my memory skills, because to type that in and get to the graphing, I've got to erase what I wrote. Let me jot that down right here. 1/4 x plus 5. Okay. So then we're going to go to this little box. And notice it says simplify your answer. Use integers or fractions. So can I change that to a decimal? No, not if I want to get the question right. Use integers or fractions. So what did I have? 1/4 x. You can use your little fraction template down here. 1 in the top, use the arrow key. The bottom, use the arrow key. 1/4 x plus 5. Well, I get out of the box. I didn't mean to get out of the box. Now, I didn't have to put the y equals because they have this symbol. What does this symbol mean? The symbol means inverse. Okay, the inverse of f of x is 1/4 x plus 5. Okay, check the answer. Nice work. Okay, remember we had another part. This is a graphing tool that Pearson will use, and you'll have problems like this periodically. It says use the graphing tool to graph the inverse of f of x. Always click here to enlarge the graph. Watch this little yellow bar because it'll help you. What are we graphing? We're not graphing a V. We're not graphing a parabola. We're not graphing a circle. We're graphing a line. My equations in slope-intercept form, the y-intercept is 5. Do you notice in the little yellow bar, it tells you where you're at? See, whenever you move that, watching the right side of the little yellow bar, it tells you where you're at. So this was 0.05. That's the y-intercept. The slope is up 1 and over 4. That did not go up 1 and over 4. Okay, we're going to drag this one. Up 1 should be 6. Okay. Now, another way to do this is type this equation into Desmos and get 2 points from the table and just plot those 2 points. Or you can plug in a 0 for the y, get the intercepts. You need to have 2 points that are on that line. Then you can hit save. Let's see if I got it in the right place. Sometimes it's a little hard to count that slope. Okay. What I'm talking about here with Desmos, if you open a new tab, and go to your handy dandy graphing calculator. When you're working on math, I would just leave this tab open. Our equation was 1/4 x. Don't leave. Plus 5. I can look either at my graph, because I have this point at 0.5 and this point at 4.6, right? 4.6, or I could use this point. That's negative 4.4. There it was. Okay, negative 4.4. Or I can look at the table and use any of these points. And you could just keep adding numbers until you get whole numbers. There's 4.6. 8.7. Okay, until you get whole numbers. You could use these and use any of those 2 points to do the graph if you want. All right. Let's move along. For each function f of x, write the equation of the inverse, then graph the inverse on the coordinate plane. X squared minus 7. Okay. So remember, when it says write the equation of the inverse, that tells us switch and solve. And we have f of x equals x squared minus 7. Switch, solve. That means we want to get this y by itself. So add 7. How do I get rid of squared? Get rid of squared by taking the square root. Okay, now, when you take the square root like that, you want to put a plus minus in front. Okay, just remember on this assignment to put a plus minus in front. I'll show you why in a little bit. So this is plus or minus square root of x plus 7 equals y. How do I know when I'm finished? Because the y is by itself, right? Our second step said solve for y. When the y is by itself, we're done. All right, let me show you how to type this in. Go here. And notice in your template bar at the bottom, there's the plus or minus. There's your square root. We got x plus 7. Okay. Let me show you why we do that. Okay, let's say we have x squared. Y equals x squared. If I want to make the inverse of that y equals x squared, switch the x and the y, take the square root, okay. Now we know this inverse should be flipped across the line y equals x, right? So let's see what happens. When I make the inverse, it was square root of x. For Desmos, your square root's going to be in this little, there it is, square root of x. And you only get the top part, right? But what happens if I add negative square root of x? Now I have the whole thing. Now we've taken that parabola and flipped it across. What do we say that line is? Every function and its inverse are graphed across, are reflected across the line y equals x. You can see it goes right through the middle, right? This y equals x is the line of symmetry. I want to change the color is what I want to do. See how that's the line of symmetry? It goes right between those two. Okay, if I only graph the positive square root of x, I only get the top half. To get the whole thing, that's why we put the plus or the minus. Okay, back to this. Okay, now it says graph the inverse on a coordinate plane. All right, we're going to learn with transformations. This plus 7 means 7 to the left. We could go back to Desmos. Let's take these off. My inverse was plus or minus. I don't know if we have a plus. I don't think we have a plus or minus, but watch this. We can do this. Square root of x plus 7. Since we don't have a plus or minus key, we would do this. Negative square root of x plus 7. That way we have the plus and the minus, so that's plus or minus. So that's what the graph we're looking for on Pearson, or on our Pearson assignment. This is what we're looking for. This graph that's over here at negative 7. So let's go back here. Can't be that one. It's missing half. That's what we get if we leave off the plus minus. Might be that one. Doesn't look like that one. Doesn't look like that one. Okay. Use that calculator. It'll help. If you have a graphing calculator at home, a TI Inspire or a TI 84, you can use that one as well. Just thought since you're doing stuff online, Desmos is easy and it's free. Next. Find the inverse of the function is the inverse of function. Okay, we have f of x equals x plus 1 squared. Switch and solve, switch and solve, switch and solve. When do I switch and solve? When it says find the inverse. Okay, so this is x equals y plus 1 squared. When we solve for y on this one, what are we going to get rid of first? What are we going to undo first? The whole thing y plus 1, the whole quantity y plus 1 is squared, because we know that because it's in parentheses. So I would take my square root here and square root here. So now I have plus or minus square root of x equals y plus 1. Are we finished? How do we know when we're finished? Oh, Ms. Riddell said we know we're finished when the y is by itself. Is the y by itself? It's not. How do we get the y by itself? How do we get rid of plus 1? We do a minus 1. And now the y is by itself. So now I'm through. I can look for my multiple choice answer that says plus or minus square root of x minus 1. Now, some of my students probably would graph this one in their calculator and then graph each answer choice in their calculator until they found one that looked like an inverse. It's probably not going to save you a whole lot of time. This is better. Do the math. Okay. Take off the writing, the choice, check the answer. Nice work. Is the inverse a function? Well, What does plus or minus square root of x minus 1 look like? I don't know. Let's see. So we had square root of x. Minus 1. Is that what we had? And then we had, remember, because of the plus minus, now we're going to do negative square root of x. Make sure you come out of the square root sign there before you type that in. Okay, so here's our graph. Is this a function? How do we know if this is a function or not? Anywhere we draw a vertical line, if it crosses more than once, it's not a function. And although this is two different colors for the two different parts, it is one graph, right? And your vertical line crosses twice. So no, it's not a function. The important thing from that is that when you graph a function and its inverse, sometimes the inverse is a function and sometimes the inverse is not a function. Next. Find the inverse of the function is the inverse of function. Okay, 2x minus 3. You know what? I'm going to let you try that one on your own. You're going to switch to x and y, solve for y, type in your equation here, and then you can graph the inverse and see if it's a function or not. Graph the relation and its inverse. Okay, notice how many functions are we going to have on there? How many things are we going to have? Graph the relation, that's 1, and its inverse, that's 2. All right, let's find out what the inverse is. 2x plus 2 is the original. To find the inverse, switch and solve. Solve, get the y by itself, subtract the 2. Whoops, yeah, that's right. How do I get rid of times 2? Divide by 2. So I have x over 2, which is the same thing as 1/2 x. Minus 1, where did I get 1? Divide right here. Okay. Write it down. I have short-term memory loss. Okay. Now, let's do escape. And discard. Oh, it just says to graph it. Okay, so we don't have to type it in. Okay, when we graph the first one, 2x plus 2, what's the y-intercept? The y-intercept is 2. What's the slope? The slope is 2. Up 2 over 1. Okay, now we're going to save that one. And then we're going to add a second line. Remember, ours was 1/2 x minus 1. So the y-intercept was negative 1. And the slope is 1/2, so up 1 over 2. Do they look like inverses? Does y equals x go through the middle? Is y equals x the line of symmetry? It is. Now, if you didn't know exactly the equation of the inverse, if you graph this line, you could pick any 2 points, like this one is 0, 2. There's 2, 0. If you pick this point is 2, 6. Here's 6, 2. You notice any point, you switch to x and y, and it's there. I'm going to hit save and check answer. Next. Graph the relation and its inverse. Okay. You can graph this one, x minus 4 squared. Okay. Now we know that a relation and its inverse are going to be reflected over the line y equals x. Okay. We know this is a parabola. Let's look at that one. X minus 4 squared. Okay, so there's that parabola. If we do the inverse, it's going to be reflected across y equals x, right? Or you could take this point as 4, 0, we have 0, 4. This point is 6, 4, we'd have 4, 6. Let's look back at that. That one has the right parabola, the blue one. That one has the right parabola, and that one has the right parabola. But which one has them reflected over y equals x? It's going to be this one. It's not that one. That's not reflected over y equals x. It's not that one. That's not reflected. Look. That's not reflected over y equals x. Look at this one. That's not reflected over y equals x. This one is reflected over y equals x. It would be y equals x right here. And they're reflected, so it has to be that one. Next. Find the inverse of the function. Is the inverse a function? Now, that one has x to the 7th. What's Ms. Riddell doing giving us crazy problems like x to the 7th? Welcome to Algebra 2. Okay, so we have f of x equals x to the 7th. Switch. Solve. We got rid of squared by taking square root. How are we going to get rid of to the 7th power? By taking the 7th root. Okay. So there's a plus or minus 7th root of x. We may not need that plus or minus. Let's see. Okay. We only need the plus or minus if it's an even integer like square root, 4th root, 6th root, 8th root. Since this 7 is odd, we don't need the plus or minus. You need it with square root. You need it with even roots, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. You don't need it with odd roots, 1, 3, 5, 7, and so on. Uno más. One more. Oh, sorry. One more part. Is the inverse a function? Don't know. The inverse was the 7th root of x. This is good. I can show you how to do this on Desmos. 7th root of x. So let's see. I'm looking for, right here. I went to functions and to miscellaneous. Do you see this nth root right here? And it gives you a number. We want the 7th root of x. Is it a function? Let's look at the table. It looks like it's going to be a tough call. 0 goes with 0, -1 goes with, what about like 0.5? Okay. And what about 0.005? Okay, see how these are different? I was wondering if these points were the same, but they're not. They're just very tiny decimals. So yes, it is a function. It passes the vertical line test. Last question. Now uno más. Okay. Find the inverse. Graph the relation and its inverse. Okay. You can do this. Right? Switch. -4, negative. So the first point should be what? Should be -3, -4. And then 0, -3, and then 2, 1, and 6, 3. Well, that's how they had you graph it. Let's see. Oh, they just have you pick it. Okay. Choose the correct graph of the relation. That's the original. So the blue one should be -4, -3. Oh my goodness. Can we tell which one is? Let's look at this one. Blue should be -4, -3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Yes. -3, 0. Yes. 1, 2. Yes. 3, 6. Yes. And then the red should be -3, -4. Ooh, nope. Bzz. Okay, so the blue ones were right. Is that one the same? Looks like the blue ones are the same on all of them. Let's look at this one. -4, -3. Yeah, the blue ones are the same. Let's check the red ones. -3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Nope. This one's not fun. Okay, -3, -4. It's got to be this one then. -3, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's -4. 0, -3. 2, 1, 6, 3. That's it. Me. Okay. Now, remember how I skipped one because I was going to let you do it? When you get ready to submit, always hit review progress, and you would see, oh, wait, I skipped that one. You could hit view question and go back to it before you hit submit my work. All right, we're done. Bye.